Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. We just need to go over very briefly the requirements for getting ASHA CEUs if you're listening to the live webinar today on April 12th, 2017. If you want to get ASHA CEUs for the course, please attend the entire 1-hour session. The handout and all the forms you need to complete for CE credit will be emailed to you after the webinar, and you can also find those forms on speechandlanguage.com today. Mail the ASHA participant form and the evaluation form to the address shown at the bottom of the slide. You'll be mailing it to Darlene Davis on Boulevardy Road, and the forms must be postmarked by April 26, 2017. If more than one person is at your location, be sure to download the attendance sheet and have each person who wants CEUs sign the sheet and complete the ASHA participant form and evaluation form. No CEUs are offered for the recording of this session that's available on the website after this date. Thank you. Now that we've gotten that part taken care of, we can go on to our presentation. We're happy to welcome Marie Sepulveda, who will be talking about the Spanish edition of the GFTA-3.
Good morning to some of you, good afternoon to the rest of you. Welcome to the overview of the Goldman-Fristoe Test of Articulation, 3rd Spanish edition. GFTA-3 Spanish will be available May 2017. This presentation provides you with a brief overview about the features of the test and psychometric properties. My name is Marie Sepulveda, and I am the Research Director for GFTA-3 Spanish. I am also a bilingual speech and language pathologist. I have been working on this project for about 4 years now. So today we are going to dedicate some time to introduce you to the test, discuss administration and scoring, how to interpret GFTA-3 Spanish scores, and highlight some of the test technical information and psychometric properties. By the end of this presentation, you'll be able to list 2 ways of the GFTA-3 Spanish, how it was developed to specifically address the developmental patterns of Spanish-speaking individuals, discuss one example of a case when dialect-sensitive scoring would be appropriate, and list at least 2 factors to consider when evaluating an examinee's error patterns on GFTA-3 Spanish. We're going to begin with the Spanish GFTA-3 Spanish overview, and I'll show you a quick pic of the components. So we selected a very colorful front page for all our components. So GFTA-3 Spanish is a research-based comprehensive articulation assessment that is brief and easy to administer. For most individuals, it takes 15 minutes to administer the Sonidos en Palabras and the Sonidos en Oraciones test. Sonidos en Palabras is sounds in words, and Sonidos en Oraciones is sounds in sentences. GFTA-3 Spanish offers multiple opportunities to produce 17 consonants and 11 R and L clusters in the prevocalic, intervocalic, and postvocalic position of syllables. The production of each consonant is accounted in the final score. There are 2 sets of picture stimuli within the Manual de Estímulos, the stimulus book. A set of cartoon-style pictures for younger individuals, or ages 2, 0 to 6, 11, and a set of realistic-style pictures for older individuals for ages 7 to 21, 11. GFTA-3 Spanish provides norm reference scores for an individual's speech sound abilities in the area of articulation at the word level. GFTA-3 Spanish also offers norm reference scores at the connected speech level for ages 4 and up. GFTA-3 Spanish provides you information about the emergence and mastery of speech sounds. Responses to GFTA-3 Spanish test items may contain regional and cultural patterns or variations that reflect dialectal differences in Spanish. Spanish dialectal or regional variations are considered correct responses. With GFTA-3 Spanish, you can also rate intelligibility of connected speech. The Sonidos en Oraciones test measures and compares an individual's intelligibility to the intelligibility of other individuals of the same age and sex. Both tests are available in print and digital formats. There will be more detailed information about these features on subsequent slides. GFTA-3 Spanish has unique art, but also shares art with GFTA-3, the English edition. So if you're familiar with GFTA-3 English, you'll notice that some of the art is shared with GFTA-3 English. Some of the Spanish is shared with the English. This is one example of the two sets of art that will be presented to examinees who are ages 2 through 6'11", and art that will be presented to examinees age 7 and up. GFTA-3 Spanish can be used to assess older individuals whose speech is characterized by fair or poor intelligibility. While it was important to maintain a fun, engaging look for very young children taking the test, it was determined that older students would be more engaged using age-appropriate test stimuli. Here's another example showing how the art looks with objects. Here are examples showing multiple contexts in which a phoneme is tested. In this particular case, you'll be seeing examples of the prevocalic M. 3 words are presented in the test. So it produces, each phoneme is tested in multiple contexts. So this is an example for the prevocalic M, and you see the pictures there too. There's also an example for the S, postvocalic S, in words like nariz, llaves, and tijeras. So let's talk a little bit about the administration and scoring overview. So we just talked about a little bit about the general components of the test. Now we're going to look into a little more detail about administration and scoring. So who can administer this test? A bilingual speech and language pathologist who has native or near native proficiency in Spanish. The bilingual SLP is also trained and experienced in administering and interpreting articulation tests. Knowledgeable of speech sound disorders in the Spanish-speaking population. Knowledgeable of Spanish phonological development and transcription using the International Phonetic Alphabet, or IPA. Knowledgeable of pronunciation differences among speakers of Spanish dialects. So now, who else can administer this test? GFTA-3 Spanish can also be administered by a speech-language pathologist collaborating with a bilingual professional. So it's an SLP without native or near-native proficiency in Spanish. The SLP is responsible for being familiar with speech sound disorders in the Spanish-speaking population, Spanish phonological development, transcription of the individual's production of target words using the IPA, knowledgeable in dialectal differences and cultural considerations, collaborating with a bilingual speech-language pathology assistant or other bilingual professionals, for example, a psychologist, occupational or physical therapist, diagnostician, or teacher. This bilingual professional should be trained on test administration and only administer the question prompts and the suggested cues. For resources for working with bilingual professionals, you can always refer back to asha.org. In addition, the speech and language pathologists who are collaborating with a bilingual professional must have knowledge of the following. Must know about speech sound disorders, Spanish phonological development, again, the IPA, and the dialectal differences. This is very important for the SLP to know in order to administer GFTA-3 Spanish. SLPs also must have training or experience in testing individuals from various linguistic and cultural backgrounds. If the SLP or if you don't meet these qualifications, defer testing to a bilingual SLP. Important to know is that when you're collaborating with a bilingual professional, additional preparation time and training between you and the bilingual professional is required. Before testing, meet with a bilingual professional to plan the content and format of the assessment sessions. During testing, the bilingual professional delivers the test stimuli and engage with the individual while you transcribe the individual's production of target words. You should be present during testing to transcribe the responses, answer the bilingual professional's questions, observe the individual's behavior, and intervene when necessary. After testing, you and the bilingual professional should discuss what occurred during the assessment sessions. Review the individual's responses with the bilingual professional. With the help of a bilingual professional, presents the results to the individual if he or she is an adult or the individual's parents. The sonidos en palabras, or sounds in sentences, includes 50 target words that were selected carefully to minimize lexical variations. For example, in standardization, the word carro, or car, was included but deleted for final publication because this word elicited many lexical variations. Examples are carro, coche, auto, automóvil. Words that were specific to one particular geographical region or dialect were not included in the test. The Sonidos en Palabras test includes two sets of stimuli, one for younger individuals, referred as cartoon art, and another set for older individuals, referred as realistic art. It is recommended that the cartoon art is administered to children ages 2-0 to 6-11, and the realistic art is administered to individuals ages 7 to 21-11. However, you can use the art style that the individual is more comfortable with. For example, a 19-year-old with cognitive deficits may prefer the cartoon art style rather than the realistic art style. GFTA-3 Spanish measures 17 consonants, including 3 allophones and 11 R and L clusters. All consonants in the word are measured. Vowels are not accounted in the total score. Each target word is elicited using a question prompt. For example, ¿qué es esto? If the individual doesn't produce the target word after 2 question prompts, you can use a suggested cue to elicit the target word. Completing the phonetic error analysis table provides a way to easily see the error patterns by phoneme and syllable position. After completing the Sonidos en Palabras test, you can obtain norm reference scores. So how is the test administered? So if you're familiar with GFTA-3 English, there is no need to learn new test administration process. You present the words and the individual names the picture. If the individual doesn't label a picture spontaneously, the test provides a suggested cue, or you can provide a different cue that follows the format provided. State the word, say something related to that word, say the question prompt. If that doesn't work, the individual can imitate the target word. This is a section of the record form where you record the individual's responses. As you can see, all consonants in the word are scored. After completing the Sonidos en Palabras test, you can use the phonetic error analysis to identify the individual's error patterns by looking at the place or location of the error within the syllable, prevocalic, intervocalic, or postvocalic. R and L cluster errors are recorded separately. Here is another view of the phonetic error analysis. Another way to analyze the individual's error patterns is by looking at the manner of production. So in the record form, in the phonetic error analysis, you'll see that we list all the phonemes arranged by stops, nasals, approximants, fricatives, affricate, and liquids. The Sonidos en Palabras test allows you to obtain and report normative scores, including standard scores, percentile ranks, age equivalents, and growth scale values. The Sonidos en Oraciones test is a sentence repetition task that assesses an individual's sound production of words in connected speech. Administration of the Sonidos en Oraciones can be very informative if an individual has a mild to moderate articulation disorder. That is, he or she can produce sounds correctly in simple context in single words, but intelligibility breaks down in connected speech. There are two stories, one for ages 4 to 6 through 6'11", and one for ages 7 and up. Story 1, it's Una visita al parque, for ages 4 to 6'11", includes subject matter and vocabulary familiar to younger individuals and is illustrated with cartoon-style pictures. Story 2, No puedo abrir mis ojos, for ages 7 to 21'11", includes subject matter and vocabulary that older individuals may relate to and is illustrated with realistic style pictures. In the Sonidos en Oraciones test, you rate the individual's intelligibility in connected speech as good, fair, or poor during the repetition of each sentence in the test. Similarly to Sonidos en Palabras, in the Sonidos en Oraciones test, all consonants in the target word are scored. In the phonetic error analysis, consonants are organized again the same way as in Sonidos en Palabras, organized by stops, nasals, approximants, fricatives, affricate, and liquids. Not all phonemes are represented in each story. As I mentioned earlier, the Sonidos en Oraciones test allows you to score the intelligibility of the individual's connected speech. The individual's production doesn't need to match the target sentence exactly for you to rate intelligibility. As long as the individual produces 2 or more words in connected speech, you can rate his or her intelligibility. Based on your clinical judgment, you can rate the individual's intelligibility as good, fair, and poor. To calculate the intelligibility score, count the number of occurrences for each rating, 1, 2, 3, 4, and write the sums in the intelligibility rating subtotal boxes at the story you administered. Then, record the sum for rating 1 in the total of good ratings box. Then add the sums for ratings 1, 2, 3, and 4. Record the total in the total for all ratings box. For sonidos en palabras ages 4 to 611, the total of all ratings will always be 15. Divide the total of good ratings, or ones, by the total of all ratings 1 through 4, and multiply the quotient by 100. Record the value in the overall intelligibility rating. Intelligibility percentage can be recorded by using Table C in the manual. The values in the table represent the cumulative percentages of the normative sample that earn an intelligibility rating of less than 90% or above 90% by age. In this particular case, 40% of the individuals in the normative sample obtain an intelligibility rating of less than 90%, and 60% of the individuals in the normative sample obtain an intelligibility rating of 90% and above. Both the sonidos en palabras and the sonidos en oraciones test account for variations in the production of consonants due to dialectal variations. For example, an individual who speaks Spanish from Puerto Rico will often aspirate the postvocalic S and substitute the postvocalic R for an L. This is considered a dialectal variation and not an error. However, if these substitutions occur in an individual who speaks Mexican Spanish, that shouldn't be considered a dialectal variation and should be counted as errors. You can also document any changes in vowel production on the first page of the protocolo. Similarly, any other concerns can be documented on page 1 of the protocolo, which is the record form. The Sonidos en Oraciones test also offers normative scores, including standard scores, percentile ranks, age equivalents, and growth scale values. Once you have identified the individual's error patterns in the sonidos en palabras and the sonidos en oraciones test, use the estimulación de consonantes y sinfones, or stimulability, to determine the relative ease with which the individual can correctly produce previously misarticulated sounds at the syllable, word, and sentence level. So for GFTA-3 Spanish, we have 3 different options for you to administer and score the test. If you use or are familiar with Q Interactive, this is a digital version using the 2 iPads. And that's most of the standardization, or most of the standardization was obtained, the data was obtained using the Q Interactive program or using 2 iPads if you were an examiner during the standardization stage. So with Q Interactive, you are guided through test administration and you record responses on the fly as you test. Scores are generated automatically as soon as you complete the test. So once you click the Done button or you finish administering, you will receive the scores automatically. If you use Q Global, the scoring platform requiring 1 web-enabled computer or tablet, you can purchase a digital manual and digital stimulus book to display the test stimuli to an examinee in a face-to-face or telepractice setting. You still purchase paper record forms to record responses. You have the option of purchasing Q Global Scoring, where you enter item level information to obtain a score report. You can order individual score reports, or purchase 1, 3, or 5-year unlimited use subscription. And the third way to administer the assessment is using the paper components and new hands for it. We're going to move a little bit. We're going to talk about interpreting the GFTA-3 Spanish results. For both tests, there are separate norms for females and males. In general, the emergence and mastery of consonants and R and L clusters is very similar, but not identical. So if you see here in my slide, you will see that mastery for all phonemes exhibited in singleton and cluster productions. For females, most of the sounds develop by age 6 to 6'11". If you scroll down and look at the males, most sounds were developed by 7 to 7'11". So as the theory of that the girls usually develop faster, it's in this particular case is also true for articulation in the Spanish sound production. Late developing sounds included 7 and above, included the sound, the inner vocalic D, the tap R, the trill R, and the R cluster PR. For males, the late developing sounds, which it was 8 and above, the tap R and the trill R. GFTA-3 Spanish follows this premise. Phonemes should be tested in multiple contexts because productions can be affected by surrounding vowels and consonants and the complexity of the word structure. In addition, research shows that there is a range of phoneme acquisition with a time period between emergence and mastery of sounds. Phoneme mastery occurs gradually, with increasing ability to produce a sound in multiple and more complex contexts. All sounds productions are not created equal. Even in single word productions, accurate production of the target phoneme is influenced by context, as I mentioned before. So you would have simple versus complex syllable shapes. The most typical syllable shapes in Spanish are CV, consonant and vowel. Few of them are consonant, vowel, consonant. The typical ones are CV, CV, simple 2-syllable words. So production changes when the target is next to other consonants, vowels, or blends, as I mentioned before. Has speech sound development data really changed? And so we're going to have to define what's emergence and mastery so you're able to follow our record form and our studies. So emergence in GFTA, or in general, is defined as the age at which a phoneme is present, one or more correct productions in the child's repertoire. They're reported as the ages at which 50%, 75%, and 90% of children spontaneously produce a phoneme correctly one or more times on GFTA-3 Spanish based on age and sex. Mastery is defined as the ages at which 85% of the GFTA-3 normative sample by sex produce a phoneme with at least 85% accuracy. So in GFTA-3 Spanish, all errors are counted toward the raw score. Inclusion of multiple occurrences of trill R, for example, does not penalize a young child who is not expected to master trill R. Data collected during standardization show that trill R is produced correctly by 90% of the children in one or more contexts, so not mastered, starting at age 5 to 5'11" for females and 6 to 6'11" in males. Young children who demonstrate a few instances of correct trill R production will earn standard scores in the average range. So, low standard scores indicate that a child's speech is not comparable at age and gender peers, If you look at table PR1, which is the first table displayed on that slide, shows the ages at which 50%, 75%, and 90% of typically developing children use each phoneme in one or more contexts. You can compare the information to the examinee's performance. Table PR2, which is the one at the bottom of the slide, shows age of mastery for each sound by gender. For example, males master the trill R in the prevocalic position of words at age 7 to 7-11, while females master trill R at age 8 to 8-11. However, the trill R is produced at least once by 75% of females in the normative sample by age 3-6 and 3-11. If a 6-year-old female doesn't produce a single trill R correctly on GFTA-3 Spanish, this is atypical compared to same age and gender peers, and the female will earn a very low standard score. So here, you are looking at the emergence data. So now you'll see some arrows to represent what we were trying to say. So in this particular case, we have a female age 6 to 6-11 and should be producing the trill R at least once, right? It's an emergence. If a female this age is not producing this sound at least once, she may be at risk of not mastering the sound by age 8-11. So notice in that 50% of the children in the normative sample, in this particular case it's females, are producing the trill R one or more times at age 2-6 to 2-11. Then you notice that 75% of the children in the normative sample produce the trill R at age 3-6 to 3-11. 90% of the females in the normative sample produced the R by age 5 to 5-11, one or more times. So this is interesting because I had the opportunity to travel to Puerto Rico during the summer and then October of 2016, and I was testing at an early Head Start in Puerto Rico, so ages pretty much 2 to 4. I noticed that most of the kids that I tested were between the ages of 2 to 11. Most of the 2-year-olds were able to produce a trill R correctly. So at that age, you should be expecting a trill R. Mastery data is when should a child be able to say a sound correctly with at least 80% accuracy on GFTA-3 Spanish. So this is considered mastery. So in this particular case, look at the trill R. It's mastery data is 90% of the girls. It's 85% of the girls producing the phoneme with 85% accuracy occur at the ages of 8 to 8-11. So this is another example that's commercially available. There's another chart that's available on the web, and I have listed already where you can find it. It displays, it's a developmental data on this chart show the range of ages of sound acquisition from the beginning with emergence of consonants and blends to mastery. So it's 90% of correct productions. Syllable sound position data is collapsed. So you're not able to see if it's in prevocalic, intervocalic, or in some cases postvocalic. GFTA-3 Spanish data show a similar pattern used in emergence at one or more correct productions, 50% for most phonemes tested, and an 85% criterion for mastery. GFTA-3 Spanish data indicate that it's not common for children to go from producing a phoneme to spontaneously producing a phoneme accurately 85% or more of the time. Most children produce phonemes correctly in certain contexts. For example, when producing a specific vowel or consonant combinations, before exhibiting mastery, which for GFTA was 85% correct productions. So our GFTA-3 Spanish data was very similar to this chart. So we do have a case study. We looked into it. So you have this girl, and her name is Anna. Anna, if you take a look at her scores at age 2-2, so we're actually seeing a raw score of 30. Please remember that in GFTA-3 Spanish, same way as GFTA-3 English edition, the higher the raw score, the higher the number of errors that the child is presenting. So a raw score of 30 indicates that the child produced 30 speech sound errors. In this particular case, Anna, at different ages, producing the same amount of errors. So that's what you're looking at. So it's the raw score is 30 at age 2-2, at age 4-2, and at age 6-2. So look at and it's in Anna's errors, which included a variety of late developing sounds like the trio R and L clusters, produced a standard score that is considered to be within the average range at age 2-2. Similarly, at age 4-2, if Anna continues to produce the same amount of errors and the same type of errors, Anna's scores are still within the average range when producing the same amount of errors. However, if you take a look at age 6-2, Anna's scores are considered to be within the low to moderate range. So at that moment, Anna's scores become disorder. So what we know to be best practice, the GFTA-3 Spanish scores should never be the sole determiner for eligibility for services. GFTA-3 Spanish score does not equal a comprehensive assessment. That's very important to remember. The scores indicate how a child compares to the same age and gender peers. The clinician determines appropriate next steps. GFTA-3 Spanish standard scores provide one part of the evidence you report as part of a comprehensive assessment. When you're interpreting assessment results, what we know is best practice. Examine standard scores to determine how an individual functions relative to peers. Examine emergence and mastery data to identify phonemes that should be emerging in the individual's repertoire, should be mastered by individuals at the same age. In addition to qualitative GFTA-3 Spanish data, so you can use the sounds in sentences, sounds in words. You can also use the analysis, the error analysis. You can get a phoneme inventory. Obviously, with a phonetic error analysis, you can look at correct and incorrect phoneme productions in different syllable, shapes, and word contexts. Look at developmental patterns. You can also assess stimulability of sounds. You can look at the productions in connected speech. And you can also look at intelligibility in words and sentences. However, when you're using GFTA-3 Spanish, make sure that you're also obtaining data from the following: spontaneous connected speech sample, interview with parents. You can look at what's happening at home. You can also look at any of the parents' concerns. What are the parents' priorities? It's important for you to see how the child interacts in a not a home environment, but at school, preschool, or any other places that the child interacts. So it's important for you to consult with any teachers. It could be in the classroom, also looking at the child, how the child interacts with other adults and peers. Dynamic assessment to identify techniques that elicit correct productions. What should my recommendations be? Parents and teachers want to know that their concerns about a child's speech are being addressed. But that doesn't necessarily mean that enrollment in speech therapy service is the next step. What can you do then? You can monitor the child's speech in the classroom or preschool. Do a recheck in 6 months. Is there any improvement? New facilitating context acquired independently. Is the child doing that? And what are the implications? What's happening after testing and monitoring the child's speech? There's also some places where the children can attend a classroom articulation lab. You can also suggest strategies for the parents to work and develop the sound at home. Or you can place a child in speech and language services. 4 years of work and in this section. So it's the technical information for us doing research and looking at hundreds of cases. When you get to this point, it is one of the most important steps when you're developing any type of assessment. So for the standardization sample, before I start with the standardization sample, I have to just say that we went through 3 different phases. We started with a pilot, we followed by a tryout, and then we completed a standardization phase. So it took about 4 years to complete this. So this has been a test that we have put a lot of effort and work, and hundreds, and I would say close to over 1,000 kids participating in all the samples. So GFTA-3 Spanish standardization research involved a normative sample of 860 individuals and additional samples for reliability and validity studies. For each 12-month age group from 2-0 to 7-11, the normative sample included a minimum of 100 individuals. For each 24-month age group from 8 to 12-11, the normative sample included a minimum of 100 individuals. For the oldest age band, 13 to 21-11, the normative sample included 91 individuals. The sample included individuals from a variety of socioeconomic and geographical regions. In order to represent a wide variety of individuals who speak a wide variety of Spanish dialects, the sample included individuals living in the United States, Puerto Rico, and Mexico. So if you see in the slide also, we listed the percentage of the sample for each place. So United States, 71% of the individuals who participated in the sample lived in the United States, 13.6 in Puerto Rico, and 4.7 in Mexico. Individuals tested in the U.S. were from families whose country of origin was one or more countries in Central and South America, the Caribbean, and Spain. So 17 countries in all. So all these dialects of Spanish were included in our sample. If you see, Countries including Argentina, Colombia, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama, Paraguay, among other ones. So as part of our studies, we want to display or present evidence on reliability. So the overall alpha coefficients for GFTA-3 Spanish Sonidos en Palabras and Sonidos en Oraciones tests are excellent for females and males, demonstrating a high degree of reliability for these two tests. GFTA-3 Spanish scores possess good to excellent stability across time for all age groups for both tests, and that will be the test-retest study. So if you see for Sonidos en Palabras, internal consistency for females was 0.93, for males, same. For Sonidos en Oraciones, females was 0.90, and for males was 0.92. So again, excellent for both gender and both tests. The GFTA-3 Spanish Sonidos en Palabras scores have a positive correlation with the PLS-5 Spanish articulation screener scores. So what we did, a sample of children took the PLS-5 articulation screener and also took GFTA-3 Spanish Sonidos en Palabras test. The standard difference is the effect size, which expresses the difference between two scores in standard deviation units. This enables a comparison of discrepancy scores across tests. Effect size of 0.50 are considered moderate, while 0.80 and above are considered large. So these results highlight the ability to discriminate between typically developing individuals and those with speech sound disorders. And that's the study we did for the speech sound disorder group, and it's compared to a match control. This study was done only in ages 4, 0 to 8-11, and as you see, there is it's a large discrepancy between typically developing kids and speech sound disorders. So the standard score for, let's look at Sonidos en Palabras, the standard score mean was 76.6. Well, that's for the disordered kids, and for the typically developing kids, the kids scored 104.4. So big discrepancy for the typically developing kids and the language disordered kids. So as part of the evidence of validity, we did another study to look at the sensitivity and the specificity of the test for ages 2-6 to 7-11. We used the optimal score of -1 standard deviation, or 85 and below. The sensitivity was scored as 0.88, and this means that the probability that individuals who were identified with a speech sound disorder have a speech sound disorder. The specificity was 0.91, and is the probability that individuals who do not have a speech sound disorder were correctly classified. And this is based on a pool of bilingual SLPs that participated and indicated that these kids were receiving speech therapy, and that they were identified with a speech sound disorder based on standardized test results, a language sample, observations, and informal assessment. So just in time to respond to some of the questions, so if you can we're going to go ahead and start
Okay.
answering some.
One question was, can the intelligibility form be given to parents or teachers?
The intelligibility form?
Yes.
Can
parents or teachers rate intelligibility?
The intelligibility rating is scored and while you are administering the assessment. So it is the responsibility of the SLP to rate the individual's intelligibility while the test is being administered. Obviously, you can use teachers' reports and parents' reports about intelligibility. You can take that into consideration when you are making decisions or reporting observations from other sources of data. So it is, the intelligibility is something that you rate and score while you're administering the sonidos en palabras or sounds in sentences test, sonidos en oraciones test.
Okay, and then someone asked, what are the 3 allophones tested?
The 3 allophones tested are, so in Spanish you do have the prevocalic B, the prevocalic D, and the prevocalic G. In intervocalic positions, most of the Spanish-speaking children will produce an allophone. So they're, so it's for, the allophones are for the intervocalic B, D, and G.
Thank you. Does Q Interactive account for dialectal variations, or does that need to be done by the SLP?
The dialectal variations is always done by the SLP. So if you notice that the child is displaying or using some dialectal variations, as I mentioned before, let's say a child from the Caribbean deleting the final S or the post-vocalic S, and you know that's a dialectal variation, you don't mark and score this dialectal variation as incorrect. So you will have to not touch if you're doing Q Interactive, do not touch a phoneme in the keyboard, and it won't be considered an error. If you touch the symbol, then it will be scored as an error. But if it's a dialectal variation, do not touch it. Do not. You can still record it. We do provide a section where you can transcribe the dialectal variation, and you always have another section to write notes.
Just a comment, if you have a question, be sure and put it in the chat box, because we don't have the hand raise feature enabled for this webinar. Someone said, I recently used the GFTA-3 English with a child who was 6 years, 11 months. Their only errors were R and TH, and norms placed them at less than 0.1%. Have you noticed similar results with the GFTA Spanish? Specifically with R's, because R's are the latest, one of the latest developing sounds, some kids will have residual errors till about, if you remember when I mentioned about the mastery of the R, it's one of the last sounds to develop. So yes, I've seen it with the R and with some of the blends too. And interesting enough, for Spanish, for females was the PR. So that was one of the results that I was very surprised when I obtained all the data. I looked at, so PR, which I think P is one of the early sounds, but no, it's one of the most difficult sounds for girls. Oh, this is an easy one. Are there plans to develop a KLPA-3 Spanish to use with the GFTA-3 Spanish? And the answer at the moment is not at this time, but we certainly pay attention to customer requests. And so if you're interested in that, be sure and let us know, because that helps us support submitting that as a project. Is it also preferred for this test that the focus when reporting performance be percentile rank versus standard scores?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, you can use both equally. I see one here. I'm just reading one. It says, on the standardization sample, why was Mexico 4.7, Puerto Rico 13.8 of children tested? Why not be the same amount between both? And it's just happened in this particular case. What you're seeing is not the sample. It was we tested more kids from Mexico. It's just that 4.7 kids were directly tested in Mexico, and I believe it was Mexico City. Puerto Rico was kids that were tested only in Puerto Rico, but we also included additional Mexican kids and kids from Puerto Rico who are living in the United States. This is just to show you the kids who were testing only at that particular geographical region, but we included more children from Mexico and more children from Puerto Rico who are also living in the United States. This is just a geographical information that if it's more of a the dialect spoken, we do include more kids in the sample, or more individuals in the sample. There is someone about the...
There's been a couple of questions about how do you describe the difference between the tap DAR and the trill DAR?
Okay. So the tap R is produced in medial position, or intervocalic position. In, let's see, the word, a great example is perro, that's a trill R, pero, but, it's a tap R. And also tap R is usually found also, in the postvocalic, like comer, jugar. So there's a slight variation, and there's usually, and I have experience because I'm actually working with a disordered kid. The kid, this particular child can produce a tap R because it's very similar to the production of the Spanish R, the English R. So that child is mainly exposed to English at this point, but mom wants to work on a trill R. The child most likely will never acquire a trill R. So she's compensating using a tap R for the trill R, but there are differences. I see a question, the allophones. The allophones for B, D, and G are only, there's 3, and they are measured only in the intervocalic position. B, D, and G, intervocalic position. Which country is the substitution SH for CH in Spanish word a dialect difference? In general, I have heard SH and CH in every dialect of Spanish. I had the opportunity to test all the children from different dialects, and because in Spanish the SH this is exclusively for English. CH is both of them are used. I've heard chicle, but I also heard chicle, and it's not considered an error in Spanish speakers. See, I'm looking at more. Someone is asking their intentions to develop OWL Spanish. I'm not sure if this was asked. I didn't know here. Okay, so OWL Spanish.
OWLS is not published by our company, so we don't have any information about their publication plans. You can check with WPS at wpspublish.com.
There is another question. Can the GFTA-3 be administered in English and Spanish? Yes, because we do have an English version and a Spanish version. However, GFTA-3 Spanish should be administered to children who speak Spanish only, who also are bilingual, but speak Spanish and English fluently. If the child speaks more English than Spanish, the child or student should not be taking GFTA-3 Spanish. Then it's appropriate to administer GFTA-3 English. Does the scoring manuals include specifics about the dialectal differences at all? Yes, we do include. I believe it's Appendix E in the manual. There are some samples of dialectal differences. So, and throughout the manual in the administration directions, I talk about samples or examples of dialectal variations and how to score them. Anything else?
Someone was saying that having a hard time getting to the right place for the link that we put for the firstwords.org link. So we'll send that link in the follow-up email after the presentation.
Oh, I see one. What is the status of the CL5 Spanish?
We're still working on it. If
working.
you have any interest in participating in the standardization, that would be awesome. You can sign up at our website, pearsonclinical.com. Go to Contact Us, and there's a place to click on interest in being a field examiner. It takes us a long time to collect the data needed to produce a test, and any help would be greatly appreciated.
Well, I appreciate it, all of you. If you have any questions, you can put it in the chat. If I have not responded to any of your questions, we will send you a follow-up email. And I believe that's it for all. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Good listeners. And just watch out. We do have a Spanish presentation scheduled towards the end of May. I don't think we have posted it yet in our website, but it will happen soon.
If you're listening to this live webinar today and want to earn ASHA CEUs, please follow the instructions that you see on the page in front of you. The forms need to be mailed to us, not emailed. To Darlene Davis, if you have any questions, you can email her. And we look forward to you joining our next webinar. Thank you for joining.